Before we get into this, if you enjoy deep NBA stories that go beyond headlines and actually explain what's happening behind the scenes, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss how this one unfolds. Now let's talk about Kawhi Leonard, because something massive just happened, and there's officially a clock ticking on this entire situation. Up until now, the conversation around this case has been strangely quiet about the one thing that actually matters: the salary cap. Not speculation, not jokes, the salary cap. Because according to multiple former high-level employees tied directly to this case, some of whom are now federal witnesses, the entire reason this alleged endorsement deal existed in the first place was to move money to Kawhi Leonard outside of NBA rules. And that's where this story stops being internet noise and starts becoming a real problem. Here's the short version. Investigative reporting uncovered allegations that nearly $50 million was routed through a so-called environmental initiative tied to a third-party company, money that investigators believe ultimately benefited Kawhi Leonard while avoiding the salary cap. The league opened an investigation. Investors filed lawsuits alleging fraud. And now, for the first time, we have actual dates that could bring this entire thing to an end. February 15th, 2026, the NBA's All-Star Game, hosted inside the brand new arena owned by the very team under investigation. Then, just 8 days later, February 23rd, 2026, a key figure connected to the company at the center of this case is scheduled to be sentenced in federal court. That matters because this individual is one of the few people with firsthand knowledge of how the money allegedly moved, who approved it, and why it existed at all. Think about how wild that is. The league's biggest showcase event taking place under the same roof as an unresolved investigation, while the person who could potentially confirm everything is days away from sentencing. You genuinely cannot script timing like this. And now, things have escalated even further. Lawyers representing the Clippers' ownership have gone on the offensive, calling the allegations exaggerated and baseless, and claiming the lawsuit relies too heavily on public reporting. But that response triggered an immediate and firm rebuttal, one that points to internal documents, employee testimony, and months of unanswered interview requests. For nearly half a year, the Clippers have stayed silent. And when silence lines up with deadlines like these, it usually means something big is coming next. If this was all just speculation, if everything being alleged here was truly baseless, then there's a simple question that hasn't been answered. Why not clear it up? If you're innocent, you don't hide behind statements. You don't stay silent for months. You sit down, you explain, and you release the documents that prove your story. And that's exactly where this case starts to feel uncomfortable, because the one document that could supposedly end this entire controversy still hasn't seen the light of day. In a recent court filing, lawyers for Clippers ownership made an interesting point. They noted that the plaintiffs attached more than 90 pages of exhibits to their complaint, yet deliberately left out the endorsement agreement that sits at the center of this entire theory. Their argument is simple. If the contract isn't included, then the plaintiffs must not have the evidence. But flip that logic around for a second. If that endorsement deal proves everything was legitimate, if it clears ownership of any wrongdoing, then why hasn't it been released? The team had a partnership with the company involved. Access isn't the issue. Control isn't the issue. This document could shut down speculation overnight, and yet nobody has put it out there. Not the team, not ownership, not the plaintiffs. Silence like that doesn't happen by accident. Now think back to when this story first broke months ago. Ownership publicly brushed it off, calling the idea of being involved crazy and positioning themselves as victims of fraud, just another investor who got fooled. That defense sounds clean on paper, but it starts falling apart when you look at what wasn't addressed. According to reporting based on internal testimony, a senior executive connected to the company at the center of this case stated that the deal involving Kawhi Leonard didn't originate on their end. It wasn't pitched to the Clippers. The Clippers approached them. And the deal, as it was described internally, wasn't optional. It was important. That changes everything. Because if the team initiated the arrangement, then this wasn't a billionaire being tricked. It was a calculated move. And that directly contradicts the idea that ownership was merely collateral damage in someone else's scheme. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. In just weeks, the NBA will host its All-Star game inside the brand new arena owned by the same team under investigation for the most serious salary cap allegations the league has ever faced. The league has already made it clear the event is not moving. Publicly, they insist that All-Star planning and the investigation are completely separate. But behind the scenes, reports suggest the league's findings likely won't be finalized until after the event. Think about that. The NBA is moving forward with its biggest showcase, collecting the revenue, the exposure, the global spotlight, before deciding what consequences, if any, will follow. That alone raises questions. But the date that truly matters isn't the All-Star game. It's 8 days later. That's when a key figure tied directly to this case will be sentenced in federal court after already pleading guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud involving hundreds of millions of dollars. And in federal court, one thing matters more than almost anything else at sentencing: cooperation. And that's where this story could take a turn no one is ready for. If the person at the center of this case has information that could help prosecutors go after bigger targets, people with real power, real money, real influence, then everything changes. Because that's how the federal system works. We don't know what has already been shared behind closed doors. We don't know which documents have been turned over. We don't know what emails, texts, or internal communications exist between executives, intermediaries, and the Clippers organization itself. But what we do know is this: federal prosecutors are extremely good at flipping defendants when the stakes are high. And the stakes could not be higher here. The individual facing sentencing has already pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud involving hundreds of millions of dollars. On paper, that exposure is massive. Decades, not years. And in federal court, one factor outweighs almost everything else when it comes time for a judge to decide a sentence: cooperation. That's why February 23rd matters so much. Because whether anything is said publicly or not, that sentencing date represents leverage. And leverage is how entire cases flip overnight. Now, while all of this legal pressure is building, there's another reality unfolding in real time. Kawhi Leonard is still trying to do the one thing this entire situation was built around: play basketball. Or more accurately, stay healthy enough to play basketball. And once again, that's proving difficult. Just this week, the Clippers sent Kawhi home early from a road trip due to left knee irritation. The same knee, the same issue, the same lingering concern that has followed him for years and repeatedly kept him off the floor. Nothing about this is new, but every setback hits harder given what's happening off the court. Yes, the Clippers have had a surprising resurgence. They clawed their way out of the basement and now sit around the edge of the play-in picture. Some fans see that as progress. But zoom out for a second. This is the team ownership allegedly took enormous risks for: financial risks, legal risks, reputational risks. And after all of it, they're still barely hanging on to relevance in the Western Conference. That contrast matters. Individually, when Kawhi does play, he's been excellent. Efficient scoring, elite defense, strong all-around numbers. The talent has never been the question. Availability has. And every time he misses another stretch, it reinforces the same uncomfortable truth. This franchise pushed all its chips in on a player whose body has never been reliable. Which brings us to the possible outcomes, because at this point, there are only a few paths forward. First, there's the civil lawsuit. A judge must decide whether the case survives the motion to dismiss. If it doesn't, the lawsuit ends quietly. But if it does, everything changes. Discovery begins. Documents get subpoenaed. Executives get deposed. Internal communications come into play. That phase is where stories stop being hypothetical and start becoming factual. Second, there's the NBA investigation. The league hired a major law firm to handle it, and by all accounts, they are taking their time. That tells you something. Under the current rules, penalties for salary cap circumvention can include fines, loss of draft picks, and voided contracts. But context matters here. This wouldn't be viewed as a first-time issue. The organization has previously been penalized for attempting to use external incentives tied to contracts. That history matters. And if the league determines this went beyond creative interpretation and into deliberate circumvention, the punishment scale expands. Multiple draft picks, contract voids, and in the most extreme scenario, consequences at the ownership level. Finally, there's the federal angle. Sentencing doesn't just end cases, it sometimes reshapes them. Cooperation can open doors investigators didn't previously have access to. And once that happens, timelines accelerate fast. So now, everything converges. The league's biggest event, a sentencing date days later, an investigation still unresolved, a franchise trying to win games while its future hangs in the balance, and a superstar whose health, legacy, and contract are all tied to decisions made far above his pay grade. Over the next few weeks, silence will matter. Court filings will matter. And what isn't said may matter even more than what is. Because at this point, there's no more waiting without consequences. Either the legal strategy works, or it doesn't. Either cooperation happens, or it doesn't. Either the league sends a message, or it doesn't. And when this finally ends, it won't just affect one team. It'll reshape how far owners believe they can push the system. Let me know what you think happens next.